I'd like to thank you all for coming to our presentation today, Linked While Apart, Overcoming Division with Linked Data. We're from the University of South Florida Libraries. Presenting today is Bonita, Pollock, Jason Boczar, Xiying me, and me, Amanda Yesilbas. I'd like to start the presentation off today by going over the challenges that we're facing, though I suspect nobody really needs to be reminded of the interesting times that we're living in. We're living in a time of division. Many of us are adjusting to new reality of working separated from our colleagues and the institutions that formerly brought us all together physically and socially. Even if we can work in the same physical locale, we're very careful and distant with each other. Our expressions and faces are covered with masks, and we wash our hands in surroundings after every encounter, hopefully. To overcome this physical separation, we've had to adapt and take on new technologies and applications. We've had to change the way we communicate with each other, learn new etiquette. And though it's still an ongoing process, my experience at USF, and I'm sure what the rest of you is that we're successfully navigating this challenge and getting our work done and helping our patrons. But we're also faced with the myriad of other divisions in the world today beyond physical. The largest divisions and challenges we're facing in the United States go beyond this physical separation. The nation's been rocked and confronted by racial inequality in the form of Black Lives Matter. A divisive presidential campaign continues. Income inequality has become exacerbated by COVID and the economy. And let's not forget the hashtag #MeToo movement that happened before the rest of this. And in the onslaught, the West Coast is on fire. It feels like we're all burning, both literally and metaphorically. Adding fuel to this fire is the consumption of unreliable information. Ironically, we are more connected and turned into the news now more than ever on the internet. Sadly, fact-checking and sources are few and far between on memes. The Pew Trust is doing a series of reports about the future of truth and misinformation online. One of the researchers from the project called this the nuclear winter of misinformation. Lee Rain, the director of the Pew Research Center of Internet and Technology Project, says, a key tactic of new anti-truthers is not so much to get people to believe in false information, it's to create enough doubt that people will give up trying to find the truth and distrust the institutions trying to give them the truth. False information is easily spread, and hashtags that mean one thing one day can be subverted by the next in this fast-moving information flow. This is an obvious example of how hate groups' name can be turned into an inspirational message. So the question becomes, who has the good information? Libraries and cultural institutions have gone into action to quickly react to these different divisions and upheavals that we're seeing in our society. We've trying to give voice to the underrepresented and provide reliable resources of information. We began creating new guides, new portals, and content to address the current turmoil or to show up our longstanding weaknesses in collection and policy. These reactions are clearly seen using the example of Black Lives Matter. Part of USF's response to the Black Lives Matter was to increase our anti-racism holdings. Our choices were partially informed by the quick and good work of other libraries like the University of Minnesota's anti-racism reading list. When revisiting the list for this presentation, I see that's become a rich and mature guide pointing to a range of content about racism and African American history, like the Mapping Prejudice Project in the slide and the Umbra Search, which we'll revisit shortly. Somebody has taken the time to create a curated guide linking all of the data by hand. So the University of Minnesota guide is turned into a reading list, links to mapping projects, links to their Umbra digital portals, and other things that they highlight. The Triad Black Lives Matter protest collection is another example of a new portal and collection that has been created and curated by the library. The collection is a real time, allowing people to submit pictures of ongoing protests. So again, revisiting who has good information. Well, I'd like to think we do at libraries, but we've always had good information beyond the stuff that we're creating now. The Special Collections at USF is building the African American Experience in Florida portal to highlight and improve the discoverability of value resources we already have here. And besides the services that are being built in response, there are already rich resources out there supporting African American history and culture, such as the Library of Congress's digital collection. The Library of Congress's African American collection is a prime example. These longstanding digital collections is incredibly easy to find on the internet as well. Quick Google search for African American photographs will pull it up. But let's be honest, the rest of us aren't the Library of Congress. Our collections are not going to be the top search results. So how are people going to find your digital collections? The next example is the Umbra Search. This is another good example of a pre-existing resource the University of Minnesota has created. Umbra Search is supported by the Institution of Museum and Library Sciences, the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, and the Council of Library and Information Resources. This has a strong pedigree. Another thing about the Umbra Search is it's an aggregator. It aggregates content from over 1,000 libraries, archives, and museums. It doesn't actually host the content, but instead pulls thumbnails and metadata of objects into a central catalog. But with all of this funding and technology, it doesn't translate to easy to find on the internet. I actually came across this source by the University of Minnesota's anti-racism guide. I've tried numerous searches in Google to attempt to find it, even searching the Umbra Society, a group of Black poets and artists that it was named for, and this doesn't pull up their resource either. So this brings us to addressing what is the problems that we have. So how is anyone going to find all of these new library books that USF has purchased? They're in the library catalog, but how does one access the library catalog besides going to the university's website, going to the library website, and going to our catalog and searching? How are they going to find out about our different digital collections that we have? How can we make them more accessible and easier to find? And if they find one digital collection, how do we find the rest of the universe of content? So they found our site, but how do they find everybody else's information? How can we link the new data to the old data? So we have all these great new websites, but we don't, and we have all these great old websites, but they're not interconnected. And how can we expect the average user to find this information in this content? Despite our enthusiasm, all of our new purchased and curated content are not going to reach the world as fully as we'd wish. Library and digital content remain siloed from the internet. The library catalog and digital platforms are even siloed from each other. We make records and enter metadata that is fit for library use, but not shareable to the web. As Karen Cole in her LIDA keynote in 2011, so this has been something that's been going on for quite some time, asked, how can we move from being on the web to being of the web? Her and our suggested answer is with linked data. So now I'm going to pass it on to Bonita to speak about what is linked data.
Hello, my name is Bonita Pollock, and I'm going to talk to you about linked data and how we can use it for our digital cultural heritage collections. So linked data is one way to increase the access and discoverability of critical digital cultural heritage collections. Semantic web technologies follow the RDF standards for creating linked data. Linked data is created by forming triples, and each triple contains uniform resource identifiers, or URIs. These identifiers allow the computer to understand and interpret the metadata. A triple consists of a subject, which is what the metadata triple is about, a relationship link called the predicate, and the object, which contains information about the subject. For example, William Shakespeare wrote Hamlet. This is an example of a triple. Each piece of this triple is written as a URI containing the identifier information, or a literal piece of information. The subject of the triple, William Shakespeare, would have an identifier which links to his LC name authority file. The predicate is the relationship piece of the triple, which also has an identifier. In this example, wrote would be identified by the Library of Congress creator field, and the object of the triple Hamlet would be a literal in this case because the title does not have a URI. At the bottom of the screen, you can see what the triple would look like written in RDF coding. Subjects and predicates always have URIs, which allow the computer to make the linking. The object can have a URI, or it may be a literal. Together, the URIs along with the literal tell the computer everything it needs to know about this particular piece of information, making each triple self-contained. Triples with their URIs are stored in what's called a triple store database, which is a graph-style database, which is very different from our typical relational databases that we're mostly used to working with. Information in a triple store database is then retrieved using Sparkle query languages, which was developed especially for use with linked data. Because linked data is stored as self-contained triples, machines have all the information needed to process the data and perform advanced reasoning and logic programming. This leads to better search functionality and lends itself well to AI technologies. Many of today's modern websites are making use of these technologies to enhance their displays and provide greater functionality for their users. Sharing digital cultural heritage data with other institutions and transferring data from one repository to another is one of the greatest difficulties in maintaining digital collections. For example, one institution used Dublin Core to store its metadata about a Black Lives Matter cultural heritage collection. And they want to link and share their data with another repository which uses MODS-METS. There must first be a data conversion before these two repositories can share information. Dublin Core and MODS-METS are two completely different schemas with different fields and metadata standards. These two schemas are incompatible with each other and must be crosswalked into a common schema first before any data can be shared. This typically results in some data loss during the transformation process. This makes combining and sharing collections into one web portal very difficult. Enter linked data. Linked data allows institutions to share metadata more easily. Because linked data are in these self-contained triples, there's no need to crosswalk metadata from one schema into another when transferring data. The triples contain the URIs which allow the computer to identify and process the metadata schema being used in each triple. Triples can be harvested from one linked data system and easily placed in another repository or web portal that supports linked data. Triples using a variety of schemas can also be stored together in one graph triple store database. Having metadata stored in such a way increases the interoperability of the digital cultural heritage collections because they are so much more easily shared and harvested and reused by other institutions. Collections stored in the triple store databases have Sparkle endpoints. This means that other institutions can harvest your triples, carry them off, and use them in their own collections to link out to your cultural heritage collections on their websites. Libraries can easily share metadata on important collections this way, increasing the exposure and providing greater access for a wider audience. Linked data is also easier to harvest because it makes use of JSON. Using JSON, you can import collections from larger cultural heritage repositories like the DPLA, Digital Public Library of America, which also uses linked data technologies. By using linked data to transfer data from these national repositories into your own collection, it's more efficient and there's less loss of data because the triples aren't transformed or crosswalked. This increases the access for many cultural heritage collections that might otherwise go unseen. One of the big advantages to linked data is to be able to create connections between local cultural heritage collections and other collections worldwide. Simply by incorporating triples with these link identifiers from other collections into your own data sets. Libraries can display these links to other collections on their web portals, creating a multifaceted search environment for patrons. The library can provide a much richer display and allow users access to a greater variety of resources. Linked data also allows web developers to use the URIs to implement advanced search technologies, and it also allows the use of advanced logic and reasoning functionality, including the more modern AI or artificial intelligence functions that many new websites have. Many digital cultural heritage collections and libraries currently live behind the silo wall and are therefore only accessible to a small population of users. Linked data helps to break down traditional library silos on these collections. By using linked data, an institution can expand the interoperability of the collection and make it more easily shareable. Many institutions are incorporating linked data technologies into their repositories, making the use of linked data and sharing collections easier. It allows for greater audiences to have access to critical cultural heritage collections, especially for underrepresented populations. And now Xiying is going to tell us about how USF Libraries has been working to develop linked data digital collections.
Thanks, Bonita. So starting from here, I'm going to touch on how USF Library is preparing our collections as we move in towards the linked data era. USF Library digital collections house a rich collection varying from cultural heritage objects to natural science and environmental history materials to underrepresented population-related collections. Most of the collections are unique to USF, and they are of great research and educational values. We are eager to share our collections as wide as possible, and we hope our collections can be used both document and data level. I wanted to share with you how we process our collections. So we know that linked data is to create the web of data instead of the web of documents. But our collections are mostly at the document level when they come to us. So the first thing we need to think about is how to disassemble the documents to data. For example, we have a beautiful natural history collection called Audubon Florida Tavernier research papers. This is the first collection we use to experiment linked data, and the lessons that we learned from this working with this collection were applied to other collections later on. This is an image collection which includes rookeries, birds, people, bodies of water, and man-made structures. The varied images come the varied image comes from the collections comes from the research and are a testament to the interconnectedness of bird population health and human interaction with the environment. The image reflected the focus of Audubon's work in research and conservation efforts, both to wildlife and the habitat that supports the wildlife. When we first received the collection, we analyze the collection carefully as how to pull the data out of the document as much as possible. Designed a metadata that fits the content of the collection the best, which is Moz plus Darwin core. Here's an example on the screen. This image is a photo of an American kestrel. This is the document we received. Then we use the metadata to pull the actual data from this document. Here we put the description of the image in text in the abstract field. The field is indexed and searchable through our digital collections platform. Then we pull the location information out and put it in the hierarchical spatial field. On the right, we have the subject heading fields to contain the aboutness of the image. And down here, we have the detailed information about the bird and use Darwin core to contain those pieces of information. Now the document is disassembled into pieces of data and properly placed into metadata fields where they can be indexed and searched. But only to have data does not suffice the linked data requirement, because the first thing linked data asks for is URI. To add URIs to our data, we need to standardize our data and to reconcile the data against the popular authorities. Standardized data will tremendously increase the percentage of data reconciliation so that we will be able to create a lot more links with data out there. An example that I can share is one of our fascinating cultural heritage collections. This is the Armenian Heritage and Social Memory Program. This is a visual materials collection with photos and 3D digital models. It was created by the Digital Heritage and Humanities Collection team at the library. The collection is to bring together comprehensive information and interactive 3D visualization of the fundamentals of Armenian identities, such as their architectures, languages, arts, and etc. When we were preparing the metadata for the items in this collection, we made extra effort on geographic location metadata. We use Getty thesaurus thesaurus of geographic names, where it supports the hierarchical location structure, and the location names at each level can have their own URIs. We also paid extra attention on the subject headings. For example, in this record here, we use the LC subject headings, the local subject headings, which was assigned by the researchers. And at the bottom here, we use the Getty art and architecture thesaurus. This way, when we are reconcile the metadata, we can reconcile the metadata against both Library of Congress subject headings and Getty vocabularies. The reasons that we made so much effort on the geo names and subject headings is to make sure our data is meeting the standards and use controlled vocabularies as much as possible. Later on, when we are moving to linked data world, our data will be ready to be reconciled. We will have as many URIs as possible, and our data will be linked out easily and widely. One of the goals of building linked data is to make sense out of data and to generate new knowledge out of it. We are recently looking to our collections to scoop out the African American related collections, and we found 3 collections that are interesting. One is the African American sheet music collection from the early 20th century. The other one is narratives of former enslaved Floridians collection. This is from 1930s. And the third one is Alice R. Anthony African American Oral History Collection. This is from 1978 to 1979. These collections are all oral expressions. They're about African Americans' life in this country. They spanned the first 3/4 of the 20th century, around the time the civil rights movement happened. Creating linked data out of these collections will shed light on the life of African Americans through the 20th century and how that related to civil rights movement. It echoes the Black Lives Matter movement today, and it can also provide a larger social context for people to understand the Black Lives Matter movement. In our Scholar Commons repository, we have the African American experience in the U.S. collection. This is a part of USF Libraries Collection initiative that aims to leverage resources and expertise to promote diversity and inclusiveness in support of the Black Lives Matter. Besides of the collections that related to African Americans, we also have a large collection on Hispanic populations in Tampa and Cuban history and more. We hope that with the semantic web technology support, these collections can be turned to machine actionable data sets to assist research and education activities on racism, anti-racism, and to piece into the holistic knowledge base. We started to partner with DPLA about 2 years ago. DPLA is leveraging linked data technology to increase discoverability of the collections contributed to it. In the 18 months, our collection has gained over 12,000 hits through DPLA, and we're excited to see the increase of the usage of these collections, and we hope they can be accessed by more diverse user groups. Now I'm going to pass it to Jason for his concluding remarks. He will be sharing some experiences of implementing linked data. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiying. As we've heard so far, linked data can help collection discoverability. This could become increasingly important going forward. At our institution, we've seen an increased amount of materials go online in the past 6 months. Our own special collections department have been rapidly creating digital exhibits to showcase their materials. So what happens if the trend of remote work continues, if there are pushes for distance learning and online learning? There is reason to believe that digital materials may be increasingly present, and given enough time and expertise, libraries can leverage linked data to better support new and current collections. The societal impact of COVID worldwide sheds light on the importance of technologies such as linked data that can help discoverability. When items are being created and shared online, either directly related to COVID or as a result of its impact, linked data can help connect those resources. We can envision what something like this could be. New COVID research is being developed and published daily. How could institutions create linked data to connect the research and the data? In fact, this is already being done in some cases. The Publications Office of the European Union has a page about COVID-19 data as linked data. In their words, quote, "The benefit of having COVID-19 data as linked data comes from the ability to link and explore independent sources. For example, COVID-19 sources often do not include other regional or mobility data. Then, even the simplest thing, having the countries not as a label, but as their URI of Wikidata or DBpedia brings rich possibilities for analysis by exploring and correlating geographic, demographic, relief, and mobility data," end quote. The more institutions that contribute to this, the greater the discoverability and impact of the data. Changing gears a little, in 2020, there's been an increase in Black Lives Matter awareness across the country. This affects higher education. For instance, at USF, the Dean of the Libraries issued a statement supporting Black Lives Matter and stressed the importance of the library creating collections of distinction that would focus on the African American experience in Florida. And I know our library is not the only one engaged in addressing racial disparities. Many institutions have been doing this for years. Others are beginning to focus on this area. No matter whether it's a new collection or one that's been around for decades, the question remains, how do people find these resources? How are people finding collections of underrepresented people? And perhaps linked data technologies can help solve that. Linked data is a technology to help accentuate the human effort put forth to create these collections. The important part is what comes before that, finding collections that speak to and about a people and showcase their experiences, bringing awareness to them and letting their stories speak. It's when that work is complete that we can try and supplement the work with some technology that can help provide more exposure to these collections. The more I thought about this talk, the more I realized how important it is to think about the reason we're focusing on something technical like linked data. While it might be fun in its own right, because I know a lot of us here just love technology and love working with new technology, we must remember that this work has real world impacts. So linked data is a way to help to assist humans find interconnected materials around the internet. A wonderful goal, but often hard to implement. Our group at USF have had many obstacles and continue to have them. There is a technological barrier that will take well-trained staff to surmount, like creating a linked data triple store database and having linked data interact correctly on web pages. There is a time commitment necessary to create the triples and SPARQL queries. SPARQL queries themselves vary from relatively simple to incredibly complicated. For our group, there was a stumbling block of understanding how linked data even work together on a theoretical level. Taking these considerations together, creating linked data for a digital collection is not for the faint of heart, and a cost-benefit analysis must be taken and assessed. We must determine the need for linked data. The goal, despite any difficulties in creating the final product, may prove to be worth achieving, and making collections interconnected in ways that the current paradigm of the world of documents cannot do. If the local digital heritage documents have metadata that make it interoperable and discoverable worldwide, then the institution is moving closer to one of the many goals with digital objects, discoverability. At USF, we've taken the first steps in creating and converting digital collections into linked data. We've moved from understanding the theoretical basis of linked data and into the practical side, where the elements that make up linked data start coming together. Creating triples, SPARQL queries, URIs have begun, and the full implementation has started. We've located the collections we want to work on, taking an iterative approach to creating linked data as we go. And the future still holds uncertainties. The reality of COVID looms down on our optimistic look at linked data and a promise of increased discoverability of digital objects. If budgets across higher education dwindle as a result of worldwide economic uncertainty, then where will linked data projects land? What about programs that have already started? What happens to linked data that is not maintained? With linked data, there's a lot to consider. How do you start up a linked data program at your own institution? How will you get the required expertise to create appropriate and high quality linked data? Is it worth the investment? It may be difficult to answer these questions, but they're questions that must be addressed. But at USF, we continue, and we hope to continue to pursue linked data in meaningful ways. We are trying to showcase the importance of linked data and how it can benefit the other important work that we are all doing to create, distribute, and promote our collections. Like all new things, time will tell what the end result will be, but if we can help make technology work for us, use it to emphasize the great human labor that goes into these collections, then that could signify success. And with that, we would like to thank DLF and the planning committee, as well as all of you for attending our session. The next slide will contain our contact information. Thank you very much.